Hello, and welcome to my first video of this project. I'm not really sure what to call it yet. Maybe something like Nostalgia Dive or something like that? Yeah, we'll go with that until, someone says it's copyright or something. Anyway, yeah, welcome to Nostalgia Dive video where I dive into my child, teen, and possibly young adult memories and pull out something that makes me feel something. Good, bad, maybe even nothing. I take that and I rip it to the forefront of my mind and see what my fully grown adult self thinks about it. For this month, I thought about what I wanted to do first, something that I thought maybe would not be very well known to everyone else, and that thing is a little game called Sheep Raider. That's right, Sheep Raider. So before I get into the development of the game, which isn't really much, and some of the finer details, I'd like to talk about my connection to it, why I picked it, and some, if any, memories I may have of it while I was growing up. Now the first thing about it is when the game was purchased, it was purchased by me, by my mother. I remember seeing it in a large glass case at Walmart, among a bunch of other titles for the PlayStation. And at that time, the TVs that let you try demos of games to see if you wanted them were definitely still around. Unfortunately for me at the time, it was not an option on the demo console, but there was one thing about the game that caught my eye, and of course, that being the main protagonist, none other than Ralph Wolf. Now I know some of you may be confused. Pendulum. That's Wile E. Coyote. Well, no, it's not Wile E. Coyote. You see, there are two distinct differences. In the Looney Tunes verse, there is Ralph, and there's also Wile E. Coyote. Now, Ralph has a few differences than Wile E. Coyote. Ralph is often seen with a red nose and wide eyes, while OG on the block, Wile E. Coyote, has a black nose and yellowish eyes. Anyway, this caught my attention because you see, back when I was around 5 or 6 years old, not a thought in my young brain other than, whoa, that's the guy from Space Jam. Now, I know what you're thinking. Dude had 3 frames in the movie, and this kid made that connection. Crazy, right? Well, I have another small side tangent. Basically, I was obsessed with Space Jam at this point in my life, like 2001 when the game came out, which at that point was an almost unhealthy obsession. I'd watch the movie at least once a week. It may not have been my favorite movie at the time, but even seeing that game case, I was like, oh yes, this is the one. So we purchased it. I believe my mother paid around $20 to $25. I couldn't really find pricing on it online during my research, but that sounds about on brand for the time. Anyway, I had to wait and play it until the next day. But it was fun. Unfortunately, I never beat it as a kid, and we will get to that reason, the gameplay of the game itself, but for now, let's go ahead and talk about the development of the game. Now, funny enough, I couldn't find much on the game's dev cycle. I found out a few things. I knew that the game was developed programs by their in-house dev, at the time known as Lionhouse. I dug up a little bit on the publisher to see if I could find out anything about the dev, but like I said, I couldn't find much. The other thing I tried looking into was the A Black Sheep production splash screen that would appear after the Infogrames one. Now, a few things about this. It creeped me out as a kid, mainly because of the creepy-ass sounds, and then the black sheep that showed up at the end, corrupting the film and melting it. Apparently, there was a bit more to this splash screen in alternate versions of the game outside of America. The black sheep takes out a weapon and takes the bird flying around in the sky. This was censored in the American version, understandably so. Like most of this obscure information, a limited amount of the information of the devs are in the internet. Googling them is not appreciated in America since they are all a majority from France, since that's where Lionhouse was based out of. Oh well. What we're really here for is the gameplay. So let's move on to none other than the mechanics of the game. The game plays on standard PlayStation analog DualShock without issues. Hell, it even played on a PlayStation controller that didn't have analog sticks, since that's all I had until I got a PS2 to play it afterwards. But by then, I had moved on from the game. It allows free moving like standard modern movement controls. Triangle lets you center the camera, which you will do a lot in some levels. Square would let you jump. Pressing it in air would allow you to do whatever your kid wanted to do in real life at the time, which was to double jump. Then you also have circle, which when tapped rapidly allowed Ralph to run like a motherfucker, running so fast in fact that he could sprint over gaps between cliffs. He would also use this to get away from Sam Sheepdog, more on him later in earlier levels, and a couple other tiny situations where you'd need to use it for, but outside of that, it doesn't really have much use in standard levels. Of course, you also have the X button, or as some would call it, the cross button, which Ralph's primary button to interact with objects in the game, picking up sheep, reading signs, talking to characters, and picking up and using items. Speaking of items, there is quite the amount that you get to use, and the list isn't really expansive, but you have some staples like lettuce to lure sheep, elastic to pull or bungee yourself around, a sheep costume, even an inflatable sheep prop. There's more, of course, to this, but those are the ones I remember seeing in more than 1 or 2 levels. You get these items by ordering them from Acme, a store that seems to literally have everything in their catalog, which I believe is single-handedly being funded by the 2 coyotes that constantly have their products. The gameplay elements of the game are expansive, at least for a one-off PlayStation game. The rules are simple. Steal a sheep from Sam's sheepdog's flock. Now, at first, this is pretty easy, but gets more complex as the game goes on, of course. Most of the time, the sheep stealing is the easiest part. It's the second part of your tasks in the level that become difficult and sometimes infuriating at points, which is to get the sheep into the goal, a white circle, if you'd like to know. Both you and the sheep have to be in this goal to complete the level. I guess it's easy enough if you break it down to its most basic of tasks. Another aspect of this game is Sam himself. Sam Sheepdog, for most of the game, aside from 1 or 2 levels, will remain stationary surrounded by his woolly flock. The thing is that he catches Ralph in his area, then he will barrel right up to Ralph and pummel him into the dirt. There is this little icon that will appear in the right corner of the screen that shows Sam's blocky-ass head with 3 different colors of background. One is green, which means you are close to his area, but he can't see or hear you yet. If it's orange, he can see and hear you. If you are out in the open, you can use bushes, hide behind rocks, and use the R1 button to sneak around this area. If it's red, well, you either need to run away, if you can manage, or prepare for the ass beating of your life. Sometimes in certain levels, it seems actually impossible to get away from him. I do know that as the levels progress, he gets a little faster each time, up to the point where he is as fast as Ralph sprinting, so there is that as well. Once you have your woolly target, as I said, you need to bring it to the goal. As the game goes on, usually this is the part that takes a majority of your game time. Sheep Raider at its core is a puzzle game, and so of course with that, you have to complete a puzzle, which usually consists of revealing or getting to the goal. Now when I say that it takes a long amount of time, I'm not saying you are wasting hours doing this. Hell, I think the longest time I was in a level was about 40 minutes. This game by no means is long. There are about 15 core levels, and with that I believe there's about 2 secret levels. You could theoretically beat this game in less than an hour according to a speedrun which I watched online, but even if you are just doing the standard puzzle solving like I did, it shouldn't take you more than 4 or 5 hours to complete. I won't go too much further into the mechanics of the game as far as the use of the items are concerned. However, I do want to voice my frustration for one particular instance. In one of the later levels, you do use a minesweeper to get through a minefield. Pretty standard, and by the time you get to this level, you already have completed another level, which also has the minesweeper. Now, the first level that you use the minesweeper, Ralph leaves behind some tracks to let you backtrack or even see which part of the minefield is safe to walk. That is not the case for this level. That becomes frustrating, and come to think of it, every level after this point is kind of frustrating, but we'll get to that later in the nitpick section down the line. Anyway, in this level, there is a button where you need to place a rock on top of it to allow the gate to open so you can get inside. The thing is, Ralph in this level does not leave tracks behind, except in certain parts of the beach, which I feel would be necessary in this case, since you have to bring the rock with you into the minefield. I know of a game that does this whole minefield thing really well, which is another PlayStation game, Sarge's Heroes, which I can't recall if it's the first or second one, but there are sections where you would sweep the minefield, it would reveal the locations of the mines, and then you could run through the minefield without issue later on. I feel this would have frustrated me a lot less if this were also the case for this game. Anyway, I think this brings us to the goods and bads of the game, and I will go ahead and put a spoiler tag here since I do talk a little bit about the story, what little the game actually has, which is in regards to the ending. If you have any inkling to play the game, I would probably skip ahead or pause the video and then get back to me. So, I'll have a lot to say in this section, but I understand this game is from forever ago. It still had some aspects that surprised me for it being the game it was, and some things that, coming from playing a lot of modern games, didn't age very well. So the first thing in the game I thought they did pretty well here was the feel of physics, which I know games were doing already at this time, but like I said, this is a one-off PlayStation title, and it was cool to see. You can really see it in one of the earlier levels when you order some items from a mailbox. They land on a seesaw, one item crate on each side. So what you have to do is you have to roll a boulder down the hill to cause one of the sides of the seesaw to go as far up as possible so both of them slide off and then break open in the process. The other instance is in the minefield level that sucks that I was talking about before. There's an item crate that you put on a catapult to break open, but if you hit the alligator with it, it will bounce off in a random direction and then break once it hits the ground. Another good example of this is the elastic. One level allows you to put the elastic between two trees and use it as a slingshot, which was cool, or you could even tie one end to it and then you could have it automatically tied to Ralph, and then you could bungee jump off places, which is used in a multitude of levels throughout the game, which I thought was pretty awesome. Another aspect of the game that I really enjoyed was seeing the small cast of other Looney Tune characters outside of Sam and Ralph. The most prominent one being Daffy Duck. He is found almost in all the levels in some way, shape, or form, dressed in an outfit matching the level. He is your main guide throughout the tutorials of the game, which are usually at the beginning of said levels. You see other characters as well, Porky Pig in the first level for instance, Gossamer, the big hairy red monster, the Bull from some of the shorts, and then you got Sam, the rootin' tootin' cowboy who in this game was a pirate. You also get some cameo appearances from others among the crowd in the main hub of the game, which, I mean, if you're really fans of the Looney Tunes universe, you can kind of point out the more popular ones. I knew about Sylvester, Speedy Gonzales. I think even Bugs Bunny has a likeness in one of the levels. And then also in that same level, my main man, Elmer Fudd, shows up at the very same time. All characters in there are, from what I can understand, sound like or are their TV show counterparts, which I think is really awesome in my book. I had no feeling of them saying, oh, they just hired, a one-off guy who can do impressions to do these voice lines. If it is the actual voice actors, awesome. And maybe I'll put something up in the actual video that will say if they had or not. I'll do a little bit more research there. But the one thing about Sheep Raider, and this is the main part here, the one thing about Sheep Raider that gets me to think about this game quite often is the soundtrack, which is one of my favorite game soundtracks in video games of all time. Now, I know that this is quite a statement, but it's just cozy and chill, and it's perfect background music. I'm not even sure what genre I'd consider it since it has quite the mixture. Some sounds like jazz fusion, others have like a drum and bass feel, or even lo-fi maybe. If anyone could rip the music from this game and uncompress it like they did with the GoldenEye soundtrack a while back, I will personally shout you out in a future video down the road, when I inevitably use it as music for some of my other videos. Even just the soundscape of the levels themselves when you turn the music down is so chill. These guys did a really good job with it. The other thing I wanted to say is the design of some of the levels are fantastic. When you're in a level select hub, the game, each door that leads to each level has its own little flavor or background on what you will experience there. The skyboxes in these levels are very Looney Tunes, and most of the time are very relaxing. The blues are bluing great. And when it comes to that infinite sky in a lot of the levels, the set pieces like the castle in Gossamer's level are built with a lot of care. I love almost every single one of these designs. Leaning into the more negative concepts of the game, which I wrote down while playing, and again, I know it's a game of its time, but I just want to bring up some of the things that might turn away a modern day gamer. Back to the camera for a moment, it acts like it has a mind of its own. Sometimes it would automatically switch around and move perspectives, which sucked when jumping on platforms. I'm already terrible at platforming, and the camera changing up on me caused me to die more times than I'd like to admit. Another thing in regards to the camera is that some of the tighter levels, the camera would get stuck and clip through the level to get back to Ralph, making it pretty much necessary for you to hold the triangle button to go into first person to completely reset the camera behind you. Even then, the camera would clip and get stuck sometimes. Another thing which isn't too bad, it's the weird checkpoint system. I guess it's not really a checkpoint per se, now that I'm thinking about it. You see, there is a level where you have to launch a sheep up a tall ledge, and it lands on a seesaw. If you're not quick enough, your sheep would slide off the seesaw and pass away, restarting basically right before when you launch the sheep up there. So, here's the thing. I placed the lettuce on the seesaw preemptively before getting the sheep. So I left to go get the sheep, and then I got messed up and slugged by Sam in that process. So it kicked me back to the place which I was near the ledge. Well, I went back and stole the sheep, and then I launched it to the ledge, and the checkpoint, for some reason, got rid of the lettuce that I had placed before, even though this should have been saved to that supposed checkpoint. Since I guess I had been there already, There are a few other small times where similar things happen, but this is when it became most apparent to me that this is what was going on. I guess that moves me on to the more frustrations with the game than real actual problems. I think it's due to my huge lack of attention span I got for the last few levels of the game, and really got bored with the game loop. I think it could be mainly because lots of the mechanics of the game, or hell, even stealing sheep from Sam Sheepdog, became pretty trivial. It was really only after you stole the sheep that you would see the levels ramp up in difficulty. I'd say there was a little more difficulty in actually grabbing the sheep from Sam initially. Doing these puzzles before grabbing the sheep would make actually getting said sheep all that more rewarding, in my opinion. Now, there are some levels like this, and I believe there is so much more potential for a sequel to this type of game, or even a remake that added a few more levels. Sheep Raider toes that line of being a certified banger for me, mostly due to the soundtrack, but if it swapped the game loop around or had levels that use some of the items more than once in the game, I feel it would cement it fully in that certified banger status, that there would be no excuse for it to be a staple in the PlayStation 1 catalog. And hell, the game, when it came out, had good reviews. Most of the reviews I found from back then were above average, and even user reviews had some pretty good things to say about it. Back when I was a kid, I never beat the game, and about 4 or 5 years ago, I went back and I beat it. The thing that stopped me when I was a kid was the Dancing Ghost mission. You had to time your button presses to match the beat, and if you couldn't do it, you had to restart completely. As an adult, I went back and did it no problem, probably because my hand-eye coordination has developed a little bit more. But this is a Looney Tunes game, a game for kids, and I know for a fact that the last 2 or 3 levels would not be easy for a kid at 5 or 6 years old. Even replaying this last month as an adult, the last few levels really sucked. And spoilers here, when you beat the game, Ralph wakes up and it's all a dream. It's all in his head. Now, I know back then that wasn't necessarily a you gotta be kidding me moment, but if that kind of thing was pulled off nowadays, everyone would hate it. I at least want to see my main man Ralph get a huge dinner for completing the game. Bro's always starving. I want him to have gotten at least one victory, but no. Dude gets up, leaves his house, and then just clocks in for another day of getting his ass beat by Sam. I guess I should mention another part of the game that I have not brought up, which are the time clocks. They are orange machines to clock in and out, and if you find one in the level, you get a bonus point, which allows you to view some of the bonus stuff, concept art, mugshots of the devs, and hints on certain things, like secret levels. I'm not going to lie, I never went out of my way to get every single one of these, mainly because by the time I went back to grab them, it heavily increased the amount of time I was in each level. The time clocks themselves have tedious puzzles as well, so if you wanted to 100% this game with no guides helping you, then you'd be putting maybe 20 to 25 hours into the title. I wouldn't waste your time if you're not looking to 100% it. You can look at the funny mugshots and concept art on the internet though, which, I mean, some of them do have some pretty funny things to say, and a lot of the concept art, I'm not sure if it was drawn by one of the original Looney Tunes artists, but it looks very good. But to pull ourselves out of this negative part of the video, I just want to say thank you for watching this far if you have, and if you've liked this video, leave a comment and let me know what you think about this game. Share a memory about it with me, or hell, tell me about your favorite Looney Tunes moment. Yes, Big Chungus can be the answer as well. If you want to see my future projects, you can subscribe to me as well. The plan from here on out is to release one video a month, and I have a few ideas for the next one. But if you have any that you do want to see and you want me to try, leave them down below as well. Anyway, I know people don't watch these for a score or anything, but I'd say Sheep Raider is a big nostalgia trip for me, replaying the awesome levels and listening to the music that puts it all together. I'd say, for me, it's about a 4 out of 5, losing only 1 point for the end game. Anyway, I think that's it for me this time. I hope you all have a good night, and I'll see you next time. Peace.